Aloha, and thank you for joining me today. I'm State Senator Sam Slom. They often refer to me as the Lone Wolf or the Lone Ranger. Actually, I prefer Lone Ranger because he was a good guy, and Lone Wolf, I'm not into the Twilight Vampire series, so that's the thing. And you know what? I'm not even really that lonely because I know that there are a lot of people that are underrepresented in our state because of the makeup of our state legislature, and they want a voice and they want issues to be heard, and that's what we try to do in the state Senate. Well, the 2013 legislative session is history, and now all we have is the crying and gnashing of teeth for people that didn't get exactly what they wanted. And it wasn't for lack of trying, because there was a lot of lobbying going on this year, a lot of emphasis, a lot of special interest. But in the end, the legislative session has ended, and for at least the next 8 months, you only have to keep one hand on your wallet or purse while we're still around. You know, a lot of people say, well, what do you do the rest of the time? Do you just go home or go to the beach or play Texas Hold'em or whatever? There's still a lot of things that the legislature engages in. We do have informational briefings. We do have hearings. We meet with constituents. We have town hall meetings. And in terms of the Senate, we still have our responsibilities for advise and consent and some special investigative committees. So we'll keep busy this summer. We will pledge to do the work for the people, and we'll pledge to help try to make it a better day, preparing for the 2014 legislative session. But while it's not too much of a memory, let's take a quick look down memory lane as to what happened during 2013. You know, depending on who you talk to, it was a great legislative session. Everybody was happy. Everybody did what they wanted to do and what they thought they should do. But there's always two sides to the story. First of all, let's start out with the state budget. Now, the state budget is the primary reason that the legislature meets in odd-numbered years. It has a 2-year fiscal operating and capital improvements budget. There's also a budget for Office of Hawaiian Affairs and a separate budget for the judiciary. But it's the executive budget that really is the key. When we started out in January, the governor had presented a budget with $1 billion of new spending. The House, which got the budget first, worked on it, had hearings, made changes, and they got it down by about $600 million. Well, it went over to the Senate. The Senate put back almost all of the expenditures, and even some that the governor had not asked for. So when the budget finally went to the conference committee in late April, the vehicle that emerged, House Bill 200, was closer to what the governor had wanted initially. I think it was off by about $250 million. And so some people have said, well, it was a reduction. No, it was a reduction in the increase of spending and debt. And other people have said, wow, this was a fiscally conservative budget. No, not when you're talking about $24 billion for 2 years. I'm old enough, I can remember when the biennium budget was $4 billion, $2 billion per year. Now that's the size of our city and county of Honolulu budget. And here's the thing. While everybody was slapping each other on the back and saying what a wonderful job they did, very few of us thanked the people that are really responsible, you, the taxpayers. It's the taxpayers that have to pay for everything. You have to come up with the $24 billion, whether you're paying for the budget at the state level or at the city and county or your neighbor island county or the federal government. It only comes from the taxpayers, only comes from the people that are working and paying taxes. So thank you, Mr. and Mrs. Hawaii taxpayer, for footing the bill. Now, you should know that in addition to that $24 billion state budget, which is not fiscally conservative at all, there are additional appropriations bills that add billions more to what our liability is. $500 million for salary increases for public workers, for example. Is that fair? Well, people say you get what you pay for. But is that always true? We've got 20% of the workers who are unionized in the public workers and 80% in the private sector that have to pay for them and give them benefits and compensation that most of them in the private sector don't get. So everybody is struggling right now, even though the governor and the Council of Revenue said, hey, we've turned the economic corner in Hawaii. I don't believe so. I'm an economist by trade, and I can tell you that the visitor industry and the visitor industry alone is supporting Hawaii's economy. Retailing, flat. Wholesaling, non-existent. Manufacturing, where? None of the things that we really need to balance off our economy are strong. Yes, we have defense and non-defense spending, but they're subject to the whims of Congress. And construction, we still see a lot of people on the bench. Well, what were some of the other things that were done during the session? There were some good bills, and there were no major tax increases, although there were some tax increases, including the transient accommodation tax, which now has a permanent 9.25% rate, the conveyance tax, but fees, everywhere you look, tremendous amounts of fees. And if you're paying, you can't tell the difference between a tax and a fee unless you have the option with a fee not to buy or utilize the service. But they've gone up tremendously. We had all kinds of special interest grants and aid, more money for welfare recipients and the homeless and drug addicts and criminals, but not for the everyday man and woman in Hawaii, particularly the single moms, the families, and small businesses. I can't pick one single bill that was beneficial to businesses, and small businesses make up the backbone of our economy. Not one single bill that alleviates their costs, their regulations, their prohibitions, provides incentives for them. There was almost an increase in the minimum wage, which a lot of people don't understand. You don't just simply say you're going to give somebody more money. There's a cost involved with that, and all business owners know that they have to pay additional insurance costs and mandated benefits costs, and then other employees who didn't get the minimum wage increase, they ask for increases too. So from my standpoint, it's a good thing that the minimum wage didn't pass. Likewise, the so-called successor employer bill, which means that if you were to sell your business, a successor employer must retain all of your employees at their current salary rates and benefit rates and all that. Well, who's going to buy a business like that? It's not going to help business, it's not going to help current employees, and it's not going to help investment. We did pass a bill, which I think is a bad bill, which the governor probably will sign, that relates to domestic workers. It means that if you hire somebody to clean up or maid service or tree trimming or whatever, that they're entitled to the same kinds of benefits and compensation as unionized employees. And if they don't get it, we've created a new separate cause of action. So again, who's going to win? The attorneys, because they'll have new lawsuits that they can bring. I look at bills and I look at a legislative session from the standpoint of A, do we do more things to give people more liberty and more choices? B, have we improved the business climate? And C, have we removed some of the tax and other burdens that make it so costly to live here and do business here? Unfortunately, if I look at all three of those segments, I can't give this legislative session a passing mark. Yes, people worked hard. Yes, some things were debated strenuously. But in the end, that's the bottom line. Have we looked at the Constitution and found that we should limit the government to those things that the Constitution says we should do? No. The government is doing more and more things. We had a big debate all session about so-called early education, a bill that would have added $100 million to provide early education, or as some like myself say, subsidized babysitting for 4-year-olds. And this was necessitated because the legislature, in its wisdom, 2 years ago ended the state pre-kindergarten program. Well, people get those services now, early education, but they pay for them. This bill would allow all taxpayers to subsidize all people that are getting those private services. And there's a constitutional amendment, which you'll be called upon to vote on next year. I hope you vote no. It's going to say, we will change our Constitution to allow the state to take public monies and provide it to selected private sources. I think that's wrong. I think it's a slippery slope. I don't think it adds to education in our community. And I, for one, am glad that the major bill did not pass this year. Well, we had a lot, as I said, of collective bargaining agreements and salary increases. I voted against all of them, not because I don't like public workers. I do. They do a great job, and most of them have a good work ethic. But the union leaders are overpaid. They make demands on taxpayers that, as I say, are already overburdened. So we really need to take a look at what we're doing. One of the good things, we started on the path of trying to fund our so-called unfunded liabilities, particularly in the area of the state employees retirement system and employees United Health Fund. We have the most generous benefits for public employees in the entire nation in terms of vacation days, sick days, vesting, retirement, all of those things. And yet, we've got an unfunded liability of some $25 billion. Now look, take the $25 billion, stay with me a minute, don't have your eyes roll, and the $24 billion budget and another $5 billion in expenses. Hey, pretty soon that adds up to real money. You're the only ones that can pay that. As I said earlier, you have to fund all of the budgets from all levels of government. We also didn't do anything to protect our children. I tried to introduce and amend Jessica's law. We didn't do it, and we didn't increase the harsh penalties for the many sexual assaults that take place on our local keiki. We did do a lot for animals. We always have a lot of animal bills, and they pass, and we've made stricter penalties. But I wish we would concern ourselves even more with humans, and particularly with children. There were a lot of environmental bills. We promised, as a legislative body, to kill the PLDC, Public Lands Development Corporation, and we did. But there are still other bills that fast-track government involvement that are going to allow the phasing in of historic projects and probably trample over the Kapuna Iwi. So we have a long way to go. We shouldn't be satisfied with what we do, and you, as taxpayers and voters, must hold us accountable. Ask exactly what we've done. Ask why. You need more explanations, and you need to participate more in our state government. As I said, we won't be back until next January unless the Senate comes back in special session for judgeships, which is likely. But you can meet with your legislators. This is the time to do it while we're not in session. Let them know, let us know what you want us to do, what you expect of us, and keep an eye on us. It's a lot easier with the legislative website that we have now to follow, even when we do dumb things like gut and replace bills. But the main thing is, it is your government, it is your state capital, and those of us that are privileged to be here on your dime and elected by you have the ultimate responsibility to listen to the people, to be transparent in government, and to have good legislation. And that's not a partisan issue, it's bipartisan. But we need to make sure that we stay with our core values and principles and not be afraid to stand up and say no occasionally. Well, this has been Sam Slom, and I'm very happy to be with you, and thank you so much for inviting me in. And we call this a better day because some people say it's a new day. Well, that we have every day. What we want and hope for and expect, because we believe in Hawaii, is a better day. We all can work together to make that possible. So let's get started now. Aloha and have a better day.